That feeling that comes when you see coolant bubbling out of your overflow tank, or when you notice that sweet, terrible smell of burnt antifreeze coming from under the hood. You've got a blown head gasket, and you know what that means, a $4,000 repair bill. Before you rush to the bank or tow the car to the junkyard, you probably typed one thing into Google. Do head gasket sealers actually work? Everyone online, from the grease monkeys to the keyboard warriors, has an opinion, but almost nobody gives you the real answer. They tell you it's a scam, a temporary fix, or a snake oil that will destroy your whole engine. Well, for the last 2 years, we've been running the ultimate test on a car with a blown gasket, a test that ends right now with a full engine teardown. The answer to your question is not what you think, and the final look inside this engine will shock you. Stay right there. What's up, everyone? You're here because you're stressed. That is the classic sound of a head gasket failure. It's the most dreaded engine repair there is because it's expensive, time-consuming, and honestly, a huge pain. The proper fix is pulling the cylinder head off, machining it flat, putting a brand new gasket on, and putting everything back together. It's a lot of work. So, companies came up with these chemical solutions, these bottles of magic goo that you pour into your cooling system, hoping they will plug the leak and save you thousands of dollars. We've all seen the videos where they pour it in, the bubbles stop, and they call it a success. But what happens 2 years later? What happens after 2 full, hot summers, freezing winters, and tens of thousands of miles of driving? That's what this video is about. We didn't just pour it in and hope for the best. We ran a full 2-year test on a beat-up old sedan with a known, verified blown head gasket. We used one of the most popular, most recommended chemical sealers out there. And today, we're not just giving you our opinion. We're cutting the engine open. We're going to look inside the radiator, inside the thermostat, inside the cylinder head, and even at the pistons to see what this stuff did. The good, the bad, and the truly ugly. This is the definitive answer you've been waiting for. The challenge was simple. To truly know if these sealers work, you can't just fix a car and drive it around the block. You have to put it through the ringer. You have to simulate real life, real stress, and real time. We started with a 2005 sedan, nothing fancy, just a 4-cylinder commuter car. We specifically caused a head gasket failure by intentionally overheating it. Once we verified the failure with a chemical test that showed exhaust gases were getting into the coolant, you know, the blue fluid turning yellow, we were ready to start. The car was officially broken. It was blowing compression into the cooling system, overheating on the highway, and would quickly start making the coolant bubble and overflow when it sat still. A textbook blown head gasket. Now, we followed the instructions for the sealer exactly, and I mean exactly. The instructions said to idle the engine for 30 minutes, let it cool, and then fill it with new coolant. We did all of that. We followed the science. We didn't cheat or skip any steps, because we wanted to give this product the absolute best chance to succeed. The immediate results were amazing. After the procedure, we ran the car for an hour. The bubbling stopped. The temperature gauge stayed right in the middle. In the short term, this product looked like a miracle. For about $100, we had fixed a $4,000 problem. But that was just day one. The real question is durability. The real problem is time. Can this chemical repair hold up to the constant heating and cooling cycles of an engine? Can it handle the high pressures? Can it deal with real-world driving? That's the challenge we set out to meet over the next 24 months. For the next 2 years, this car wasn't babied. It was used for errands, it drove on the highway, and it sat in stop-and-go traffic. Year 1. The honeymoon phase. In the first year, things went shockingly well. We drove the car for about 12,000 miles. Coolant level stayed totally steady. No major drops. Oil check. No sign of the classic milkshake contamination. The oil looked clean and normal. Temperature. The car never once overheated, even during a long road trip through the summer heat. We figured maybe the conventional wisdom was wrong. Maybe these sealers, specifically the one we used, had actually solved the problem. The chemistry behind these products is often based on sodium silicate or liquid glass. The idea is that the stuff stays liquid until it hits the immense heat of the combustion chamber where the leak is. That heat causes it to crystallize and form a hard, glass-like plug in the tiny crack between the head and the block. In theory, it sounds brilliant. In practice, we were starting to believe it was brilliant. We made a small update video after the first year, and the comments were wild. Half the people said we were lying, that it was impossible, and the car would die any day now. The other half shared stories of their own cars running for years after using the same stuff. Around the 18-month mark, after approximately 20,000 miles total, we started to notice a subtle difference. First, the car started to take a little longer to warm up, and the heater didn't seem quite as hot as it used to be. It was minor, almost something you'd ignore, but we were looking for clues. Our theory was that maybe some of the liquid glass had started to settle or solidify in places it shouldn't, like the thermostat or the heater core. Second, the coolant level started to drop, slowly but surely. It wasn't the dramatic overflow from the beginning, but we had to top off the reservoir every 2 or 3 months. This suggested one of two things. Either the chemical plug was slowly breaking down, or the cooling system was getting gummed up, causing pressure spikes that opened a new, small leak somewhere else. We ran the exhaust gas test again at the 24-month mark. It was inconclusive. The fluid didn't turn bright yellow like it did at the start, but it did show a slight greenish-yellow tint, which is usually a sign of a very minor exhaust gas presence. The original leak might have been contained, but maybe a tiny, new breach was forming. At this point, the car was still driving fine. It wasn't overheating, but it was showing the first, tiny signs of trouble. This is the crucial moment most people sell the car or trade it in. They avoid the big bill, and the next owner inherits a ticking time bomb. But we weren't done. The only way to truly answer the question is to do the dirty work, the teardown. Preparation for teardown. Before we pulled the engine out of the car, we did a few quick checks. We wanted a final compression test to see if the engine had lost any sealing power over the 2 years. Cylinder 1, 180 psi. Cylinder 2, 178 psi. Cylinder 3, 182 psi. Cylinder 4, 180 psi. These are fantastic numbers for an old engine. The combustion chambers were holding their pressure perfectly. This meant that whatever the sealer did, it didn't mess up the piston rings or the valves, and, most importantly, the gasket itself was still holding strong enough to seal the combustion chamber from the outside world. Now, it's time to get this engine out and start slicing it open. All right, the engine is on the stand. We've got our wrench in hand. Let's start with the things that are easy to check and are the first victims of these sealers, the cooling system components. We pulled the radiator out and looked inside the inlet and outlet. This is where the first real bad news hits. It formed a thick, grayish, almost putty-like sediment. It wasn't rock hard, but it was sticky and definitely reducing the efficiency of the bottom rows of the radiator core. This explains why the car's cooling efficiency might have dropped slightly in the second year. If we had left this car running for 4 or 5 years, this sediment would have definitely built up and clogged the radiator completely, leading to an eventual, catastrophic overheat. Next up is the thermostat. This little device is key to engine life. It opens and closes to control the flow of coolant. When we pulled the thermostat out, it was covered in the same grayish, putty-like material. It wasn't completely seized, but the mechanism that opens and closes was clearly hampered. There was a significant buildup, almost like a calcified layer, and it was forcing the thermostat to open later and close slower. This directly relates to why the heater started to feel weak and why the car took longer to warm up. The flow of coolant was being slightly restricted. This is a small fix, replacing a $15 part, but it proves the sealer doesn't just stick to the leak, it goes everywhere. We've removed all the intake and exhaust manifolds, we've unbolted the camshafts, and now we are taking off the cylinder head bolts. Remember, the question is, did the chemical repair last? Okay, the head is off. Let's look at 3 things: the block, the gasket, and the head itself. The cylinder block. Looking at the surface of the engine block, we can clearly see the original head gasket that we never touched. But right where the original leak was, between cylinders 3 and 4, a classic failure spot, the metal surface is stained a dark, glass-like black. That is the chemical sealer, the liquid glass, doing its job. It had solidified right in the gap. It wasn't a perfect, factory-smooth seal, but it was definitely blocking the path between the cylinder and the cooling jacket. The sealer did, in fact, hold for 2 years. It performed the primary function we asked of it: the pistons and combustion chamber. Now, look inside the cylinders. The tops of the pistons and the combustion chambers are completely clean. There is absolutely no evidence of the sealer or any other contamination getting into the combustion area. The engine internals look totally normal for a 20-year-old car. This debunks the common myth that the stuff will foul your spark plugs or ruin your piston rings. If the sealer is used correctly, it seems to stay where it's supposed to be, in the cooling system. The cylinder head and channels. Finally, let's look at the cylinder head. When we flip the head over, we can see the cooling passages. And this is the big reveal, the hidden cost that makes this fix so controversial. All the cooling channels in the head, especially the smaller ones near the combustion chambers, are coated in that grayish, putty-like sediment. In a few of the smaller passages, the buildup is thick. Maybe up to 25% of the channel is filled with this solidified gunk. The true conclusion: the sealer worked exactly as advertised. It found the leak and plugged it with a hard, glass-like substance, giving the engine a solid seal for 2 full years and over 20,000 miles. But the cost was sacrificing the efficiency of the cooling system. It didn't destroy the engine, but it absolutely gummed up the internal passages, making the cooling system weaker. This test proves that head gasket sealer is not a permanent repair, but it is not a complete scam either. It's a literal time machine. It bought us 2 years of driving time by exchanging one big, immediate problem for a slower, future problem of a restricted cooling system. Conclusion/summary. So, what have we learned after this 2-year-long, full teardown test? First, the good news. The head gasket sealer absolutely, positively can work. It created a durable, functional plug that sealed the leak and restored full compression to the engine, allowing the car to run perfectly for 2 years. If you are in a financial pinch, if you need to drive the car for a few more months to save up for the real repair, or if you need to just move the car out of your driveway and get it running to sell it, this stuff is a genuine option. It's a lifesaver for people who are desperate and need an immediate, cheap solution. Second, the bad news. The sealer did not just stay on the leak. It traveled throughout the cooling system and left behind a trail of thick, putty-like residue. This residue partially clogged the bottom of the radiator, interfered with the smooth operation of the thermostat, and, most critically, restricted the cooling passages inside the cylinder head. This engine was running 2 years later, but it was running hotter, less efficiently, and was definitely a ticking time bomb for a future overheating episode. The car was running on borrowed time, bought with a chemical mortgage. The final verdict: head gasket sealer is not a repair, it is a delay tactic. But by doing so, it introduced secondary, hidden problems into the cooling system that an innocent future owner, or you, would have to deal with eventually. If you use it, you must be aware that you are trading a sudden failure for a slow, systemic weakening of your cooling system. If you want a permanent, reliable fix for the long haul, you still have to bite the bullet, pull the head, and replace the physical gasket. The chemical solution is there for desperate times, but desperate times always come with a hidden cost. Now you know that we've opened the engine and shown you the truth. No more arguing in the comments about what might happen. We showed you exactly what did happen. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss our next big car experiment.